The Labour Party is bringing Islamic blasphemy laws to Britain. That's the allegation. Pakistani rape gangs, radical Muslims committing terror attacks, calls for jihad on the streets of Britain, open borders to pour in to our nation, change the demographics forever when it comes to people from Islamic countries. The mood of the nation is clear. We don't like it. What does Labour do? They decide to introduce a new Islamophobia definition and increase non-crime hate incidents to stop us talking about those problems. Angela Rayner, who went grovelling to an Islamic centre in her constituency.
Now, I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it. Only last week, the Labour Party were supporting the ICC. The Conservatives didn't support the ICC. So at this general election on that issue, we can't affect anything when we're not in government. And if Labour get into power, we will recognise Palestine.
Well, she reportedly wants to create a council on Islamophobia, because that's what Britain really needs right now, isn't it? The council includes the most sopping wet Ramona Tory Dominic Grieve, which just shows you what this uni party is all about, doesn't it? And it also apparently includes a guy called Khwari Azim, a Leeds imam who was dismissed as a government advisor by the Tories in 2022 after backing calls for a ban on the film The Lady of Heaven, about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter. Do you remember when a load of Islamic blokes who clearly didn't have to worry about taking any time off work rocked up outside a cinema to protest about a film about Muhammad's daughter?
That these are the very people who will walk on the streets of Iraq, who will walk on the streets of Iran.
Yep, completely normal stuff there. Well, we should have known that Labour would bow down to them. Check out this Labour MP asking Keir Starmer to introduce blasphemy laws and the Prime Minister not denying it.
Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
So will they adopt the Islamophobia definition put forward by the all-party group, which was co-chaired by Wes Streeting, who is now the Health Secretary? Now, just in case you're wondering, Wes Streeting has a majority of about 400 votes in Ilford North and very nearly lost his seat to an overtly pro-Palestine candidate called Liam Mohammed. I think it's worth bearing that in mind, isn't it? Anyway, they wanted the Islamophobia definition to be Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Now, that's very broad. It's too broad. It makes it impossible to criticise a religion. We are not a Muslim country. Many people in Britain have fled Muslim countries because some of them are seen as backward and medieval. So why would we want that here? Ironically, that definition would actually stop former Muslims from criticising their own faith. Now, I find it inconceivable that Labour could look at the mood of the nation right now and think that the best thing to do is to make it impossible to criticise the actions of certain members of the Muslim community. But let's get our thoughts on my panel. We've got political commentator Alex Armstrong, we've got broadcaster and columnist Esther Crackett, and of course the journalist as well, Jonathan Liz. Alex, I'm going to start with you on this one, I think, really. But what do you make of this? Do you think that you look at the likes of Angela Rayner tipping up at a mosque there to beg for forgiveness? Is this what we end up with now? Islamophobia definitions, blasphemy laws in the UK?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think Labour is pandering for votes. It's got to try and keep those votes into the next election, particularly now when their approval ratings are through the floor. They're losing to a party that's formed just a few years ago. What's super concerning to me is when you actually read the detail of this, Dominic Grieve, who's a famous Tory wet, he set out the definition of Islamophobia that Labour adopted. He's going to potentially chair this council. On top of that, Khwari Azim, who was an imam that was dismissed by the government, He's going to be potentially on this council. Now, he backed calls for a banning of a film. That's medieval. And I agree with you on that. We cannot tolerate that. That goes against every value in our country. And this is opening the door to blasphemy laws. Even Muslim people who have integrated into this country should accept that is not the future they want or we want.
I mean, Esther, when you look at what's going on at the moment, I mean, what have been some of the big things going on at the moment? The Pakistani rape gangs, for example, and a conversation there that's been had about culture. Well, unfortunately, that kind of conversation might be stilted if we have the kind of things that Labour want to introduce now.
Look, I think that what's clear is it's very tone deaf, because I don't think there should be any sort of curbing of free speech when it comes to a religion or an ideology. And this idea that, they can link somehow Islam to expressions of Muslimness, that's very... it's not something, first of all, it has no place in Britain. It's also very murky. However, I think you have to look at it in the context of how the Labour Party sees tackling any sort of antisocial or what they deem as like hateful speech or whatever. They're not willing to tackle the underlying issues of why there's lack of social cohesion, why people are viewing their neighbours with suspicion, why there is lack of a central, basically, culture and idea and set of values that we all adhere to. They're just basically trying to criminalise speech that they don't like. And that's fundamentally the wrong approach. Instead of trying to find a way to establish common ground and say, look, this is Britain, these are the rules that we follow, you're actually trying to put more energy and more resources behind criminalising speech. I don't know how the police have time to do this. How does the police have time to pursue someone for perceived Islamophobia when they can't even solve burglaries? And all of this is led by the government's position. Now, I personally wouldn't. I don't know. Did you happen to refer to Islam as a medieval religion?
No, I didn't say it was a medieval religion. I've said that there are aspects of it, like blasphemy laws, etc., that I think are medieval.
Well, I don't think that's unique to... but that's not... Are you talking about the law or the religion?
Well, both in that sense. There are aspects of the hardline Islamic faith, as you could very easily say there are with any other faith, of course, that are medieval,
okay, so
by
the
definition.
Islamists, like the radical Islamists, fine. Yeah. But I think the fundamental point is here, we shouldn't be finding new ways to criminalise free speech, and actually the government should be dealing with the underlying problem of lack of communication.
So, Jonathan, is this the potential, does it have the potential to significantly curtail freedom of speech, in your view?
No, absolutely not. And let me tell you a country that did have very tough blasphemy laws until 2008. It was England. And another country that had blasphemy laws until 2024, it was Scotland. So if you want to talk about getting tough on religion and religious freedom, it's complete hypocrisy, because we've always had blasphemy laws in this country, and they're wrong when they're against Christians, they're wrong when they're against any religion. No one is saying that we cannot have legitimate criticisms of any religion. I'm frequently critical of religions. I think it's completely legitimate that we should be able to do that. Where it becomes a problem is when one group is targeted relentlessly in the media, and when physical attacks against that group, such as we've had against Muslims, Islamophobia...
I wondered whether or not you might have been talking about working class vulnerable white girls there for a second.
No, Patrick, I wasn't.
Sorry.
I was talking about Muslims and Islamophobia, because that's the subject of the conversation.
But genuine question, do you think something like this, expanding the definition of Islamophobia, do you think... First of all, I don't even believe that should be a word or is a word, but do you think that's the solution?
Why shouldn't it be a word?
But because it's not a thing.
Why not?
There's no phobia towards a religion. They're genuine.
It's an irrational...
No, hold on. There are genuine expression of hate and hatred towards people for various reasons. I can completely agree with that. But Islamophobia is not...
There are people who are...
There might be people who genuinely hate people because they're wearing a hijab, but that's not Islamophobia. That's just flat-out prejudice.
No,
this is a Trojan horse.
That's just flat-out...
Well, look, in the same way that you have homophobia as sort of hatred or fear of gay people, Islamophobia is hatred or fear of Muslims. I think it's legitimate to have the word.
Do you think there's a possibility that Labour might be only doing this for certain political reasons, with certain wafer-thin majorities in the important seats of various different members of their cabinet, or indeed high-profile politicians?
No,
that might have an aspect.
No, I really don't. And if they wanted to ensure that they had bigger majorities in those seats, they would change their approach to certain geopolitical issues, which is the reason. It's not because of Islamophobia that they almost lost those seats and did lose some of those seats, like John Ashworth's seat. It's because of their approach to the war in Gaza.
I think Jess Phillips doesn't know that she was almost not an MP.
That's the reason. It's not to do with Islamophobia.
Muslim men heckling her when she was giving her acceptance speech.
Yeah, and it's because they are Muslim that she's not saying it. She's not saying it, Alice. She's saying they're men. She doesn't want to call out anything in particular where she feels that she's going to get in trouble with the Labour Party for their Islamophobia adoption, which Dominic Grieve wrote. The reality is that the reason why people like Angela Rayner are pandering to Muslim groups is because they are the pro-Gaza group.
Pandering, Alex.
They can't just say things as they are. We don't have to be in trouble for saying things as they are. Most Muslim people will probably support Gaza. Therefore, if she goes and says, we're going to go and put in Islamophobia laws, that's a way of signalling we're on your side.
I'm
It's
sorry,
quite
but
obvious.
the government's
It's quite
also thinking
obvious.
about. The government also wants to, sort of tighten rules on anti-Semitism. It's about groups that have been subject to attacks physically and in the media.
Problem, because you're not going to solve that problem by encouraging sectarianism in our politics.
It's not encouraging sectarianism.
It is sectarianism.
It's going to be
if there are people that are being attacked by virtue of being Jewish, which are anti-Semitic attacks, you have to deal with the fundamental problem of people being able to express those evil, hateful views for someone just based on their religion. You don't pander to sectarian groups in this country that are tearing at the fabric of British society.
I don't know where anyone's being
UK.
pandered to.
No, but seriously, if you face anti-Semitic attacks here in the UK, you are still a British citizen. That is an attack against a British person, and that's how it should be viewed. We're all equal under the law. Stop trying to pander to certain groups.
You are
You saw a man arrested. There was a man arrested the other day. He's like,
that's not going to help anyone.
You are
There was a man
arguing there should be hate
arrested the other
crimes.
day for
But they are.
burning a
They are
Quran.
hate
There was a
crimes.
man arrested the other day for burning a Quran. That's blasphemy, in my opinion. Some people, of course, they've arrested him for aggravating people in public, which you can argue all day. However, there is a line, and you should be able to make fair protests. People burn British flags. Do I get a British blasphemy law and say, actually, I find it really offensive when you burn a British flag? That's the problem. This is what Esther's saying. When you start segregating people and giving them special rules, everyone needs to have a special rule, because that is what equality is all about. How can you have equality when there's inequality under the law?
Hate crimes are directed at minorities.
No. That is a
word.
ridiculous definition,
hate
Jonathan.
crime.
A crime against somebody or hatred towards somebody, no matter what their group is. You can't just say, well, because white people and British people are the vast majority, you can't hate against them. Of course you can. That's like saying hatred against white people doesn't exist.
I don't think that burning a British flag is equivalent to burning a Quran.
Why?
For reasons that
Why?
should be...
What's different?
Because
People hold it in just as high esteem.
Britain
People value it just as much.
Britain is, our country.
Yeah.
Everyone here is British. Burning, look, I don't agree with burning the flag, but I don't think it should be... I believe in free speech. I think it should
But
be
what if it
illegal
fundamentally
as a
offends
fundamental
my
political protest. But it's not... Being British is not sort of a protected characteristic. It doesn't make you vulnerable in this country.
But being
Muslim, it does
make
make you vulnerable in this country. It does make you liable to attack. And burning the Quran is a deeply offensive and provocative gesture.
Yeah, but
and so it should.
British
And so you
flag
can
is also
argue
There have been
that it should be that it should equate to aggravated racial hatred.
People of this country because of their citizenship, because they are British. People have died because of their ethnicity. So you can't make those statements without applying the same rules to British people. That's my
Burning
point.
the British flag may be deeply offensive and provocative to many British people in this
stirs
country.
up hate,
But for
doesn't
some
it?
reason,
Stirs up hate.
if our politicians don't view it that way, they don't get the special status of arresting the offender. That's
Guys,
not right.
I've sat here and listened. I've been fascinated by this discussion. I hope everybody else at home or listening on the radio is. But I do want to ask you all this question. I hope you don't mind. Do you think that in Britain there is a sense maybe that Brits need to be protected from radical Islam more than ordinary Muslims need to be protected from hate crimes?
No, I say either or.
I don't know the data on that. I mean, if the idea that the real threat, the major threat to this country is sort of right-wing extremism, I'm sorry, the number of actual right-wing extremists couldn't fill Wembley Stadium, and we can see that 90% of terrorist attacks that we've had in Britain are due to radical Islamism. So clearly, just in terms of the raw data, you can see where the trends are leaning towards and where most people most rationally have a fear of. But I don't think this idea of you should fear one more than the other. They're all forms of extremism and all forms of terrorism, and they have no place in Britain. And that's what we should be saying. That's the line we should be drawing.
Do you think Labour have got,
no favoritism.
the mood of the nation wrong on this? That at this particular moment in time, there might not be a massive desire from the overwhelming majority of voters that one of the most pressing issues in this country right now is to introduce things like an Islamophobia definition or some kind of Islamophobia council.
Yes, 100%. And the answer to your first question is also yes. Because at the end of the day, I believe that Labour have built their party around lots of different groupings. They have lots of different things inside the political party of Labour. And those parties put pressure on them to make laws to say, actually, you will build Islamophobia.
Well, actually, the Conservatives have played this game for decades with Kashmir, for example, and running incredibly Islamophobic campaigns against Sadiq Khan, for example.
What are you talking about?
Yes, they
run. When did they run a single ad that said, he's a Muslim, don't vote
for example, ran a disgraceful campaign against Sadiq Khan, and there were also adverts that be targeting Hindu voters, saying that Sadiq Khan wanted to confiscate their jewellery. It was completely insane, the kind of things that have happened in the name of sectarianism in this country. The fundamental point is that Muslims feel under threat. They are singled out all the time across the media and in public. I'm a Jewish person, and I don't feel singled out at all.
That doesn't mean that. I'm
well,
sorry.
fine.
There's other million Jewish people that
fine.
do.
But
So
I'm just. Well, they're not in this country, they aren't. But fine. But Muslims, there's every right for the government to seek to protect Muslims, and it doesn't mean they can't protect other people from Islamist terrorism as well.
OK, all right. Well, a robust start to the hour. Well, we're going to have a load more coming your way, including talking about how actually one of the police forces that has been dealt worsely with grooming gangs has actually managed to spend a huge amount of taxpayers' money on diversity and inclusion, so that'll bring a smile to all of your faces. But